Peter Parker has had it rough the past few months, moving away with his wife only to be brought back to New York. But with the return of his greatest foe, Norman Osborn, things have gotten even crazier. With the loss of his brother and daughter, Peter Parker and his wife Mary Jane must cope with their losses. Between their return to college, Norman Osborn, the Stacy family, new gangs, ninjas, and the Trapster, will they rise above it all or crack under the weight? Welcome to the Forgotten Era, where we'll answer all those questions and more. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Forgotten Era podcast. It's your host, Ethan, as always, and today I am very humble and happy to be joined by a name that you all will recognize, Bud LaRosa, who, as you all know, was the main inker/finisher on Amazing Spider-Man for this time period. So thank you so much for joining me, Bud. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Ethan. Thank you for having me, and hello to everyone listening.
So for those who aren't as aware, I guess, Bud is a prolific artist/inker who worked on just about every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, from the finale of the Clone Saga to the end of the first volume. On top of Spidey, he's had his hands in just about every major corner of the Marvel Universe, from an incredibly long run on X-Men to X-Force, Punisher, the Avengers, Daredevil, Iron Man, so on and so forth. We could be here all day if we named the entire bibliography.
Yeah.
I feel in a lot of comic book spaces, there's a lot of focus on writer and penciler combos for a title, but it's not often you hear about, inkers and finishers, and them getting highlighted. And that's something that I really like to do on our show, is every time that we talk about a book and discuss it, we give the full art team, inker, colorist, all of that, and every single one of them, since some issues have multiple. So I'm thrilled to be able to spotlight you specifically, and speak about your time in comics and your time on Spider-Man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So my first question for you is, how did your career in comics start, and who some of your biggest inspirations were for getting into the business?
Yeah, sure. Well, as far as inking goes, I always looked up to Joe Sinnott. As far as all-around artists, it was always Frank Frazetta, Neil Adams, John Romita, and a couple others, Bernie Wrightson, of course. And how I broke in, back then, there was no such thing as the internet, so you would either have to send in your work to the companies, or you would go to comic book conventions, and those were mainly in New York. And I originally was online to show Neil Adams my work. Okay. And it was a long line. I was on that line about an hour and a half with at the time, she was my fiance. And the guy in front of me, now, while we were online, we were showing each other our work, me and the guys on the line. And the guy in front of me, I felt, was a better artist than me. So he got up there, and Neil excuse my French, but he reamed his ass. Oh, wow. He was yelling at him like you wouldn't believe, and it basically was all about the artist in front of me was changing the original penciler's faces and expressions and all this. And I got off the line. I was so intimidated, because this was going to be the very first artist that ever saw my work and was about to critique it. Mm-hmm. And the guy in front of me just got yelled at like mad. So my fiance grabbed me and she brought me back to the line. She said, I didn't wait online for an hour and a half for nothing, So I went back to the head of the line. And before I knew it, Neil went over my work. He looked at his daughter, Chris, and he told her to give me his business card. Oh, and wow. He told me to call the continuity up on Monday, which I did. And I started doing finishes on his work. I was not allowed to touch his faces or his hands. but I did everything else, total finishes from his breakdowns. So that was pretty cool.
That's incredible. Yeah, I can only imagine that being your, like you said, the first
Yeah,
time someone's seen your work and it's Neil Adams. That's
exactly.
that's pretty intense.
Exactly. And I was just expecting him to, hit me the way he hit the guy in front of me, um, but it was quite the opposite, which, I sweated through the whole damn thing.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. I get
Yeah.
sweaty not showing people work in lines at Comic-Con, so I can only
Yeah,
imagine
there you
the
go.
added pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that was really, and he really opened my eyes, as far as being an artist goes. You know, um, he just really explained things from one artist to another,
Mhm.
in a way that a book or just, practicing doesn't do it. He really opened my eyes up, and I continued to grow as an artist, you know.
That's great. I mean, that's the best form of relationship with someone that's in the same field as you. It's as long as it's that back and forth. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. It really was. And then how I got to Marvel was pretty much the same way. I was on a couple of years went past, and I was doing freelance books and here, for independence and stuff. And I decided to hit John Romita up. He was doing portfolio reviews. And again, it was in a New York comic convention. And I think I forgot the name of the hotel it was in. But I stood in line. He gave me his card. He told me to call him the following week, and I became a Romita Raider,
Mhm.
and I worked for him in his art department at Marvel, and I stayed there. I didn't want to leave. I was there a year and a half. Usually they were there, the Raiders only did a year. And while I was there, I was doing regular work, and he told me, he said, Bud, he said, you went as far as you can go here. I just didn't want to leave him.
Mhm.
He was a great mentor and a father figure in many ways, So, but that's how I got my start at Marvel as well.
That's awesome. I mean, I like you from Neil Adams to John Romita. It's just you went from one of the greatest artists to another one of the greatest artists,
Yeah. Yeah, I was
seemingly
quite
with no
lucky.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And, back then, people from all over the country would just breaking down doors trying to get in.
Mhm.
And I guess I was blessed, I really was,
Yeah, it's a
so it
really
was a good,
it's a really great story. I know doing some research beforehand, I had seen that you were part of the Romita Raiders, but it's cool to hear
yeah,
like the story from the perspective of you,
yeah.
the person who actually had the job. So,
It was, and it was crazy because as a Raider, I remember things, so many different crazy things like Bobby Chase would go office to office looking for Mark Texiera. Now, Mark Texiera, in my opinion, was at the time one of the great artists of
mhm,
that day. He was just so super talented, and she was always looking for him. He was the regular artist on Ghost Rider,
right.
but he was always late and he was always running away from her. So and I remember him coming into the Raider room and asking who of us, there were three of us, and which one of us can help him in the bullpen overnight. So
Mhm.
at that point, I'm there calling my fiance saying I'm not going to be home, and I spent the night helping Mark Texiera on Ghost Rider all night long, and then working right from there.
Right.
Not even changing my clothes, but it was crazy stuff like that. Tom DeFalco, who was the editor in chief, if he wanted somebody to come to his office, he had a bullhorn, and all of a sudden he would go into the hallway, and with his bullhorn, he would call like an editor to come to his office. I mean, it was just off the wall stuff. It was very funny.
Stuff
You
you
know,
don't really get to experience nowadays because so many art and writer and I mean just comic book teams in general are so disconnected.
right?
So you
Exactly.
don't really get those kinds of stories anymore because
You
I
do.
mean most artists are overseas and most writers are here in the States, so it's,
Exactly.
it's
You're right.
hard
You
to get
know.
those bullhorn stories.
Yeah. That's why I figured I'd tell it,
Yeah.
because, and that was, of course, before Marvel went corporate,
Hmm.
and you just couldn't do something like that nowadays in a corporate atmosphere.
Right.
But back then it was just funny.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really great. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. I appreciate that.
Sure. Sure.
Specifically, do you remember how the job on Spider-Man came about? I know, I mean, at that time, Spider-Man was kind of in the air in general as, a franchise, I guess, because Mark Bagley and Larry Malstead had just left the book, and
Right.
then Ron Garney, I think Al Williamson were doing the two fill-in issues, and then you all came in to conclude the Clone Saga, which was
Right.
what an incredible start to your career on Spider-Man to to cap off
Yes.
that
Thank you.
story specifically. And I mean that
Yeah.
in my mind I can just see the double page splash that you all do to like the
Yeah.
text credits page and it's just like wow. So do you remember how they contacted you for that or did you kind of just say I want to do Spider-Man or how did that go about?
Well, I was doing X-Men with Steve,
Right.
and he let me know. He was like, we have an opportunity to do Spider-Man, and he asked my opinion and stuff, and I said, sure, I'll do it with you. But me being me, I kept X-Men as well,
Hmm.
and at one point, very quickly, I ended up doing 4 or 5 books a month regularly,
Wow.
which is unheard of. Most guys are doing one book, maybe two,
Hmm.
but I was doing 4 and 5 books a month for years. And so I kept X-Men, and I went over with Steve and did Spider-Man, you know. He didn't from there he went right to Hollywood and stuff. He
Right.
was doing uh, you know, consulting and storyboards for The Matrix and all
Hmm.
that stuff. So he became very successful with that. And yeah, it was a great time. I was glad to come in on the tail end of that story. That was a great story.
I
You
mean,
know.
I mean, this is kind of jumping ahead to one of my other questions. Um,
Mm.
but you worked on arguably two of the most important moments in Spider-Man's history, those being the return of Norman Osborn and also the return of Dr. Octopus.
Yeah,
Do you have any like recollection of what that was like, and did you realize kind of how impactful they would be to the mythos of Spider-Man as a whole in the future?
I didn't have you know a bearing on the impact it was going to have.
Hmm.
All I know is I grew up loving Doc Ock. And it was a great chance for me to work on one of my favorite villains.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So that was really great. You know, but I didn't. I really didn't realize what an impact it would have with him coming back.
Yeah,
Norman Osborn, same thing. Um, but I'm glad I was part of it. It was really a great time.
yeah.
You know,
I know a lot of people that when they do the Norman Osborn reveal that's on that last page of Amazing Spider-Man 418,
yeah,
and he's lighting the cigar. I
yeah,
have so many friends that just they compliment the shadowing work and they compliment the way that the smoke is rendered and everything. And I think you all just had an incredible art team on that book.
yeah.
I mean, Bob
Thank you so
Sharon
much.
on colors, like
Hmm.
he's an incredible colorist. I mean,
Yeah,
everybody you had was top-notch talent, and I really think Steve and you and everybody just hit the ground running. Like I said, it was just for the
yeah.
first book being one where you have to, it's pretty much an entire fight scene intercut with Mary Jane in the hospital, unfortunately having a stillborn baby, and then
Mhm.
immediately cutting from that to Norman Osborn. It's just like one after the other after the other. It's a incredible first issue to have on a resume, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I did while I was a Raider, actually, I was doing all the Spider-Man annuals on
Yes.
Web of Peter Porker, Amazing, all that stuff. That kind of really, that's when my um, fan part of me got over, like I was seeing stars that I was actually doing
Right.
Spider-Man. So I got kind of over that doing all those annuals for a couple of years. You know what I mean? So by the time I hit Amazing Spider-Man with Steve, then it was just me concentrating as an artist,
Right.
and the fan part of me was kind of suppressed. You know what I mean? I got over that part.
Right. It makes sense. I
Which
mean,
is, yeah,
especially
you
if you're
know,
doing, that and X-Men at the same time, it's like work, 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 and then picking up other titles too. I can only imagine.
exactly. You know,
Now you have
and
the now you have hindsight and force like just to look at the work now and you can see kind of like, wow, I did that.
yeah, it is quite enjoyable, and I'm constantly getting hit, especially on Facebook and Instagram on Messenger,
Hmm.
uh, people wanting to buy those pages and
Yeah,
all this, But once I lost my career, once I went into early retirement,
hmm,
I kind of locked down on the pages and I'm saving them for my kid, for my son. You
that's
know
really
what I mean?
that's great to hear. I mean, I was going to mention at some point that finding pages from your time on Spider-Man is like almost impossible.
Hard, yeah.
Do you have most of them, or were there some that were lost to time? I know there's a couple up for auction right now, and a friend of mine, Trout House Comics, he goes by that on Instagram. He has, I believe, two or three of the pages that you did on Amazing
Oh,
Spider-Man.
cool.
So he
Well,
he's he shows me those, and I go, damn, I want one of those, but I can never find them.
yeah. I uh I have a lot,
Mhm.
I back then I was doing what every artist did, we would just turn them over to, an agent and have them sell them,
Right.
um especially me because I was producing so many books a month. I had a million pages, so that was just extra income for me. But as soon as as soon as I went into retirement, I stopped all that, But even today, I'm still getting hit with people asking, you know. But and actually, my son, he feels bad. He's like, Pop, you could get so much money. Why don't you just sell them? And I can be happy with a Xerox copy. And I said, no. I said, no. You have to have the originals, And that might be selfish of me, but you know it is what it is. I see people like the Frazetta kids, who I know them personally, Frank's son and his daughter and stuff. And I see Neil's kids. You know, they spend so much time trying to retrieve their father's stuff.
Hmm.
You know, I don't want my kid to do that. I want him to have them, from
Right.
the get-go.
Yeah.
You
I mean, I would probably I would probably feel the same way, honestly,
know?
because I mean, especially, I mean, I know if my dad had passed and he had a bunch of items I could have saved that we got rid of, I would definitely want them. So I think it might be selfish, but I think it's also looking out for your son in the future too. Because like you said, you don't want him to have to deal with the hunt and I mean
Exactly.
possibly even the regret and guilt of that. So but
I appreciate your understanding that.
of course, yeah.
You know,
I mean, especially with the way that the art market is now, original art market, it's just crazy because
yeah.
you have people that aren't buying for the love a
Mhm.
lot of times, and sometimes it's just for, the monetary
Speculation.
value and,
Mhm.
investment, and which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but
Mhm.
if someone can hold on to a page that they have a legitimate attachment to, whether it be of characters or their father worked on it,
Yeah.
I would, in my mind, much rather those people have them than just most. So
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
there's a couple pieces that I've gotten that I've been like, yeah, if I ever get rid of this, I'll be dead because it definitely be passed on. Um, do you still do commission work or anything like
I
that
do.
on the side for people?
I do. Actually, last year I came out of retirement, and I started doing conventions and I started doing commissions. And I'm thinking about doing, something, not a book a month for starters, but maybe I'm gonna start doing like covers or, like guest appearance type artwork, um, where I don't commit every single month,
Right.
not yet anyway,
Yeah, that would
only,
be fantastic.
yeah, so I've been thinking about doing that. I'm definitely enjoying having the fans at my table every month. Like I have a convention coming up in January, so it's definitely a thrill for me back, to be back there,
Yeah,
and
that's great. I mean, especially with the way that the variant cover market is for a lot of things. Like even if you did pop on for a cover of a book or something,
yeah,
that's really all you need. Because
yeah,
I mean, a lot of people don't even buy books for interior artwork, it seems, anymore. So,
I know, that's a shame too,
which is crazy to me. As
yeah,
someone who actively enjoys reading comic books, I can't imagine buying a comic book and not reading it.
exactly. I agree, you know, but it's pretty interesting, what you mentioned with the people just being into it just for the cover and not even opening it. It's like, why do that?
Hmm.
You know, why even do, you know, well, I guess it's part of the speculation of whether or not it's going to be valuable down the
Yeah,
road and stuff. And what has me very curious is the digital age, because I see a lot of the artwork, a lot of the books are created digitally now. So
yeah.
it's like the original art part of it is gone. You can't really buy something that was created digitally,
People
as far as
sell they
you
sell
know,
what are they called? Artist proofs. They sell
yeah,
those. But in my
yeah.
mind, I mean, some people charge the price of an original, like physical art page for the price
Oh, do
of
they?
those. Because
Oh,
I was looking at some pages by an artist a while back. I won't name who
mhm,
just for the sake of, not, trashing or whatever, but
mhm.
their management was selling some of their pages for $400 or $500 that were artist proofs.
Wow.
And I
Oh,
was like,
gee.
it's basically just a poster at that point.
Yeah, it's
But,
true.
yeah.
You know, I,
Takes the beauty out of
it- I did a freelance couple of pages about a year and a half, 2 years ago for a book called Mastodons,
it.
and it's not released yet, right? So I got the pages digitally, which was a first for me, So I called up the guy who hired me, the owner of the company, and I said, give me the lowdown. How do I print this? He told me I got to change it to blue line and all this.
Mm.
I never did that before. So then it had me thinking. The penciler has the original pencils, which he scanned in. I finished it after I printed it. I inked it traditionally on paper. Which one is considered the original? You
Mm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
My piece or the penciler's piece, because his piece isn't finished. Mine is, but mine doesn't have the pencils. So I'm like,
Right.
I was questioning it myself.
That's a chicken or the egg situation.
Yeah,
Hmm. I feel like
exactly.
I guess someone would need to buy both to have the original art.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's just, I guess
very
it's
true.
separations. But
Very true.
yeah, it's interesting how things have shifted over the past 30 some odd years in
Yeah.
comics.
And now you have AI, which is another scary thing, as
Yeah,
far as,
especially in the comic book industry where things are very digital already. I know there was some speculation on Batman a couple years ago that someone was using AI to create their pages and whatnot, but yeah, that's a whole other department of scary because that I feel like that could even kill the love of the game even more.
Mhm. Yeah, agree.
Mhm. So, going kind of back to the people that you worked with at the time, like you
Hmm.
said, Steve, of course, who you worked with on X-Man, you had the chance to work with some incredible pencilers of the time, Joe Bennett, Steve, John Romita
Yeah.
Jr., even Raphael um, Kayanan. I can never pronounce his last name
Yeah.
right. And my favorite artist of all time, Tom Lyle. Um,
Hmm.
what was your approach to working with so many different talents, and what do you feel are the keys to a great art team?
Well, it was funny on Spider-Man because on X-Men, I'm going to just shift over to X-Men
Yeah,
to
yeah.
give you my point of view from there. On X-Men, because I was the only regular artist on X-Men, we had a lot of shifting pencilers. So the editor on X-Men told me keep everything consistent, keep the art looking the same. So on X-Men, I had to make this artist look like that artist, the previous one. And that was a lot of extra work for me.
Yeah.
For Spider-Man, they never asked me to do that. So the next penciler coming in, I didn't have to make him look like Steve. You know what I mean? So I just concentrated on making the best artwork from their pencils
Hmm.
that I could, you know.
Makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I know, I mean, specifically Joe Bennett, I mean, his style had shifted so much up to the point of
Oh
him
yeah.
being the regular artist on Amazing Spider-Man, because he was on Unlimited the year
Hmm.
before, or a year or two before. And by the time that he got to his regular work, I mean, even his time on those Electro issues with you, and from that to when you all were doing everything else, so much had changed. Was that a shift in his pencils as to your finishes, or was it just kind of like basically, was it intentional or was it just natural evolution? Do you remember?
I took a little bit of the the artist that I love, Joe Sinnott, who I
Mhm.
mentioned in the beginning, and I kind of gave everything a feather finish, the feathering.
Mm.
I don't know if you know what that is, but it's the little. Are you familiar with the term feathering
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
brush? Yeah, okay. Um, that was my go-to. That's what I knew best. That's how I inked, mostly with the brush. And so I added a lot of that to Joe's work. Joe has continued over the years up until today. He keeps him evolving. He's really a great artist. He never became stagnant, you know. And so, there were little parts of Joe. Back then he was relatively new.
Right.
Um, I felt free adding to him, and just making it as best as I could, for the sake of the book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. I specifically really love I so for the podcast we're up to the point of Spider Hunt, so I just recently read
Mhm.
Amazing Spider-Man 432, where you got to
Mhm.
work with Romita Jr. Since you had worked with his father for all
Mhm.
that time previously, was that a cool moment of, since you said he was kind of like a
It
father
was.
figure to work with his son, and I really love that issue specifically. It had me. I read it. The last time I read it was probably around 5 years ago or so,
Mhm.
and in my mind, reading it now, especially having to do the analyzing that I have to do for the show, I was like,
Mhm.
damn, I kind of wish Bud and Bob were the team on Peter Parker's Spider-Man, because there's
Thank
something
you.
about the way that when I put your contact in my phone, that splash page that you all did for that issue is use your contact
Mhm.
photo. Um,
Thank you.
but I just loved that whole issue with everything with Black Tarantula, and the way that it's inked and the way that it's finished and the way that it's colored is just so perfect. But anyway,
I
back to the
really
actual
appreciate
question of
that.
John. What was that like?
It was great. I Junior used to come and while I was a Raider, Junior would come into the office to hang out with his father. They would go to lunch and all this. So I met him, and I knew him, and we would talk while he was in the office and stuff. So I had a small kind of relationship with him, hello, goodbye, and everything in between. And when I got that book, I didn't want it to look like the other artists that handled him before, like Klaus and all that,
Right.
So I just wanted to do something a little different, and much different from my style.
Hmm.
I did, the work I did on that book was very different and far from my regular thing.
Hmm.
It was a lot looser. It was a lot freer. I was doing stuff with markers and, all these different tools that I don't usually work with. I wanted it to be very free and loose. And like you mentioned, and I appreciate that. I think it was successful.
Yeah.
Especially for me. You know, and I would have liked to have done more with him. Um, but I have enough going on, enough other books,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
It was crazy, it really was, you know. And that's the only thing if I could go back in time and do everything over, um, I think I would have dropped from doing 4 or 5. I think I would have been more happy doing 2 or 3 and get to enjoy what I was doing more.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I wasn't rushing things. It's just I wasn't appreciating the storyline
Yeah.
and that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As much as I could have.
When it comes to developing the stories of that time, since you're kind of
Mm,
on that topic, were you
mm,
at all involved in that process, or was it just kind of like whoever, or I guess at your point, Tom writing, Tom scripting, and then
mm.
Joe or whoever doing the pages, and then do you just get them, or are you at all involved in the creative process? Do they bounce ideas off of you, or?
I think if I had, like I mentioned, I think if I was doing 1 or 2 books a month, I would have had the time to
Mhm.
sit in and do that and do the meetings and give my input. But because my time was so limited for each book, I just I wanted to just get the work. You know what I
That's
mean?
fair.
Um, you know, because if you think about it, if I'm doing 4 books a month, that's 1 week for
Yeah.
each book. You know,
Yeah.
whereas most artists had the whole month to do it. You know, because most artists do 1 book a month.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
what, depending on the length of the book, 100 pages or more a
yeah,
month. That's
yeah,
that
exactly.
that's intense.
You know, exactly. My wife never saw me. My kid never saw me. I used to work at night, because during the day I was getting too many phone calls. So I learned how to sleep during the day, wake up, after 3 or 4 hours, and then just go up to my studio. And I didn't even have a phone up there. I didn't want to be disturbed when I was doing my work. So in the middle of the night, if I went down to the first floor to make a pot of coffee, I would wake up my son. He was like 2 years old, 3 years old, but I didn't see him all day. So I'd wake him up, have my pot of coffee with him, and then I'm like, all right, I have this baby, but I got to get back to work. So I'd wake up the nanny, or I'd wake up my wife. Here, take the baby. I got to go to work. In the middle of the night, and they're cursing me because I woke up the kid in the middle of the night, you know. But that's what I was doing.
Gotcha. At least they can't say you weren't doing anything, because instead you were doing everything, at least
Yeah,
for, the career sake.
yeah.
Um, so,
Uh,
oh, no, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to give you a little piece of interesting thing.
Okay.
Um, I remember John Romita used to pull out his hair if Spider-Man's costume was altered,
Mhm.
meaning the webbing on his uniform. If it was too much or too little, because he took pride in that,
Right.
you know. So I remember when McFarlane was starting out, and he went in and he said, "What's going?" He went into Jim Salicrup and he said, "What is this? This is an abomination, you know. This isn't Spider-Man, you know." And Jim Salicrup, all the respect in the world, he stuck to his guns. He recognized McFarlane for being such a good artist, and he said, "No, no, this is the way I want him to do. You know, this is what he wants to do, and I'm going to support him with that." And that's how Spider-Man started becoming different, stylized, you know, with like a million webs instead of the traditional.
Yeah, the crazy the spaghetti webs and whatnot.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, John was going nuts because for 25 or 30 years, it was always the same, you know.
Yeah. I always thought it was interesting to see the evolution of John Jr., just the way that he kind of went from drawing just like
Oh,
his dad to
mhm.
embracing that 90s style to then just becoming his own. And I think it was
Very true.
even more interesting when um, John Sr. would do those covers during that time where he would do annuals or backups.
Yeah.
And he would draw in his traditional style but tweak it ever so slightly to fit to the modern day because he would always have a little bit bigger of eyes, a little bit slimmer a body, a little bit more
Hmm.
just modern. So I
Yeah,
thought I know that a lot of people I know admire that, and of course I do too. So
yeah, yeah. It was a big thing for him, you know, to do that,
right.
you know, and you're right, you know, it was something to be appreciated for what John was doing. You know, he was succumbing to, you know, breaking tradition and, you know, bringing it into the modern age, you know, helping to anyway, you know.
Absolutely.
Um, I do enjoy the times when his son would ink him or vice
Yeah.
versa, he would ink his son, you know. Those are very interesting to me,
Yeah, they had
you know.
those really great dynamic forces, which barely exists anymore. But they had those really great pinups that they would always do, where they would work
Yeah,
together. Those were always
exactly.
so cool. They made for some of the coolest covers, but because
Yeah,
it'd be cool when you'd see, like you said, just the, I mean, the father-son duo. But if it was something that Junior inked, it would just look ever so more modern than if it was, the other way around. So I always, it's always just so cool especially I'm sure as an artist yourself, it's the spot the difference sort of thing.
yes,
So
exactly. You know. And did I not answer a question? I thought I'm
no,
not
no,
sure.
you've got
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. I don't
Um,
want to.
yeah, no, you're perfectly fine.
Cool.
So you were working on X-Man at the same
Mhm.
time as Spider-Man, and you were working on all your other different titles. Steve
Yeah.
had left X-Man was it early on? Was it
Yeah, it
around
was.
10
It was
issues or
pretty early.
so?
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was around that. I stayed from issue one all the way to 60. I was on there for 5 years,
that's
you know, which was a good run,
was
you
that
know.
your
That's
longest
what.
running like single
Yeah,
title?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You know, and you that's unusual, you know, it's really unusual. But I enjoyed the character at the time, you know, and it seemed like him and Spidey were always doing crossovers, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I was actually about to say, was it fun to, reunite with Steve and collaborate
Yeah.
on those crossovers?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. You know,
yeah,
it was a good kick, you know. We both enjoyed that, you know. Getting to do X-Men together in Spider-Man, you know, it was really funny, you
yeah.
know.
I mean, the first issue you all did together of them crossing over is one of my favorites that I think you all did. At least you
Well,
with
thank you.
Steve specifically, the Christmas one.
Yeah.
You get to
Yeah.
do. There's that incredible, like on the titles page. There's a really great image of Spidey like hunching with a Santa hat on an ornament.
Yes, yes,
I
with the
mean,
spider webs behind and stuff.
yes.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. You're
I
right. That was.
absolutely love that image. When I covered that on our show, I made that the like cover image. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, that and then you got to you and Steve got to do like the Ditko flashbacks in that issue, which
Right.
I always love seeing artists do their own versions of past events.
Hmm.
And like, so you can just tell the stylistic differences of like the way the eyes are shaped and the way the spider's shaped and how gangly he is and everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
that book is one of my favorites for sure. It's so, and then you have an X-Man recap double page splash too to catch everybody else up. Because I haven't really read a whole lot of
Hmm.
X-Men,
Hmm.
very little. I know I'm not really an X-Men person, but I think I would like it because I like Terry Cavanagh a lot, and
Yeah.
the art, everything kind of just speaks to me. I just haven't embraced it, but those 2 pages that you all got to do where you kind of told Nate's story in the Spider-Man book is like, yes, please catch me up. I'm so confused.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I also always loved, I don't think I got a chance to do it now that I'm thinking about it, but I always enjoyed the Punisher and Spider-Man too.
mhm.
I don't think ever did it where they
No,
were
they
so
it's
close.
unfortunate because the issue right after yours in that Spider Hunt crossover has Punisher, but they didn't give him to
Mm,
you guys.
yeah, yeah. But I always enjoyed those stories. I always thought that was an interesting mix, you know, because they're so opposite,
Yeah.
you know.
They work so well together because they don't work
Yeah,
well together.
yeah, exactly, Um, exactly.
And when it came to X-Men, did you have a favorite collaborator on that book, or was it just kind of, since you said you kind of had to make everybody flow the same way, was that, and you said the process was difficult, but kind of go into a little bit more of that.
Yeah, what happened was, yeah, I was initially, like I mentioned, I was initially told to keep it consistent, but Roger Cruz and I were working so well together that
I've
the
looked at
editor
those
said,
pages. Those were some really some really great stuff.
"Oh, thank you, thank you." He was heavy into the manga,
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
I never know.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, manga.
All right, cool. And he was very, that was an influence on him. And eventually the editor said to me, all right, relax off of keeping it the way it used to be and let his artwork show through, and that's what I did, So more and more Roger was showing up as the issues progressed, you know, which was cool,
Yeah.
because I appreciated his style a lot,
Him and
you know.
Joe Madureira, like they had that like manga style down at Marvel.
Yeah.
So I always think it's
Actually,
cool to go back to that stuff and be like, because that's really when that boom started, was the like mid to late 90s.
I have a quick funny, story about Geo since you brought him up.
Yeah,
I know it has nothing to do with the Spidey stuff I
that's
did, but
fine.
but when I was a Raider, Geo was like 15 or 16, and Terry Kavanaugh, speaking of Terry, he discovered Joe, and Joe was, every like him, I think it was either after school or at lunchtime or something. He was always coming in and he was going into the office and he was always begging Terry for work. And Terry was like, legally, I can't hire you. You're a kid. You know, you have to finish high school at least, you know. And he couldn't wait until he was old enough, and it was just a funny, funny thing. I appreciated his enthusiasm. And the kid was so, so talented,
Yeah.
you know. And yeah, so I remember him getting his first stuff. And I actually inked him early on. I think it was MCP. Yeah, it was Marvel Comics Presents. I did a back cover with him, and he was so he was so worried about how I was going to do it. You know what I mean? Because I was only a raider at the time.
Right.
You know, but it was funny. It was like I was telling him, relax, relax. But
Yeah,
anyway,
he had a
sorry
he had a mat. No, no, that's perfectly fine. I love the stories. I don't whether they're relevant to the
for
Spider-Man
the
stuff or
topic.
not doesn't matter at all. So kind of going back to the early-ish 90s when you were working on those um the annuals, did you how did those come about? Because those were what were they, the hero killer ones with everybody
Yeah,
in them? Uh,
yeah.
was that kind of just handed to you because of your work with the Raiders, or was it just happened to come across?
Well, the editor was really a cool guy. He he handled it like the main story would go to main artists, but the backstories, a lot of the backstories, he said, I want to give up and coming artists that are right on the verge of breaking in, the chance to work on a book, and every year he was doing that, and I thought that was really cool in him, so I ended up, he liked what I did on one of the titles, one of the annuals, and he ended up letting me do all the annuals that he
Yeah.
had, which was cool, you know.
Yeah.
And I was just working, even as a reader, I was working day and night.
Yeah.
I was doing 9 to 5 there, and then I'd go home with a handful of pages that needed to be done the next day or two, you know. And you know, back then, you second guess everything because you're
Right.
new and you know,
You
but
also worked on the annual with Stephen Butler, right? The
right,
the Carnage one.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's a great book. It's kind of it's cool because both Tom Lyle and Stephen Butler are my favorite like pencilers.
mm,
So I think it's cool that you've worked with both of those people.
yeah, they're both very, very talented.
Yeah,
I think that was that issue 28. I think it was.
that
It
sounds
might
right.
have been. Yeah, something like that with Carnage and stuff. Yeah, and I think I did Carnage's. No, I did Venom's first appearance on his own. Um, that might have been in an annual where he wreaked havoc in a diner, something like it. It was so many years
Right.
ago, though.
Sounds
Yeah,
familiar, but I can't pinpoint it either.
yeah. But it was his first, solo, if you will.
Yeah,
He was,
before the miniseries.
yeah, yeah. You know, Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Who do you like more, Venom or Carnage?
I like Venom more, I would say.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think I'm not a big fan of like the symbiote stuff in general,
Mhm.
but
Right.
if I had to pick one, probably Venom. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm all for like the crazy mass murder with no humanity. At least
Hmm.
Venom has the human side that comes out every now and then. And I mean,
Very.
today, those characters are so vastly different than they were when they were
Yeah.
first created. It's just a whole nother world of characters. But Eddie Brock still continues to be a very interesting character to me, and I really like him in Spider-Man stories. It's just whenever he's kind of on his own, I'm not too
Okay.
interested.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I like Venom as well.
I feel like
I don't like.
Carnage might be cooler to draw because he's kind of got
Sure.
all the weird gangly bits coming off of him, and he's just kind of crazy. But
Yeah. Yeah.
especially with what you got to do at the time with the Silver Surfer too, I'm sure that was
Yeah.
a ton of fun.
That really was. It was interesting, it was very interesting, doing him, Silver Surfer is in that way, And, another thing I did, I think it might have been an annual. My memory really is horrible. I know I worked with Ron Wilson on Rhino story,
Mhm.
but that might have been in an annual, But he was decent to work with,
Yeah,
But Tom Lyle, they were they were good artists,
I really like that issue you did with Tom because there's no Spider-Man in it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's Peter Parker, but he's just
I
in
know.
in a hoodie, just
Yeah,
hopping around, fighting Hyde, which is really cool. I love that
yeah.
book. I can't wait
He
to.
was
We're gonna cover that one soon. I just cannot wait.
oh cool. He was an excellent artist. He really was. He's underrated. There's a few artists that I always felt should have been in the limelight more,
There were,
than
especially
they
with
got to be.
with him. He contributed so much to like the early 90s, kind of everywhere on both the DC and the Marvel side.
Yeah.
So I know when
Yeah.
I talk to people, it's a lot of people had him as a professor because he taught at SCAD um,
Mhm.
up until when he passed. But
Yeah.
it's cool to see like those hear those stories from people, and then I meet a lot of
Mhm.
people that were Robin fans, so they were really into his Robin work, and then I'm on the Spider-Man side, so
Right.
we have
Yeah.
a good back and forth. So I wish you got to do more work with him. He was kind of
I,
on the outs at Marvel at that time, but I know he did an annual or two. Um,
yeah.
he was teamed up with
I,
Robert Jones a lot at that time,
mhm.
and they were a great pair. But I feel like I don't
Very
know.
true.
I just love seeing, especially with the way that I mean, you handled so many different artists on Amazing Spider-Man because they were kind of just like in and out for deadline purposes. Uh,
Yeah.
it just would have been nice to see a little bit more with Tom and a little bit more with Romita Jr., but everybody was busy.
I know. I agree. You know, if I had the opportunity to work more with JR Jr., I would definitely would have, you know. And another unsung hero of mine, anyway, that somebody who is great artist who should have gotten more fame was Paul Ryan.
Mhm.
You know, he did some great stuff. Um, it's unfortunate about some artists. But
Some people get a little bit of criticism, and then they're kind of just on the outs
yeah,
in the world, which is
yeah,
frustrating. But everybody's got fans, so at
that's true.
least somebody will continue that legacy for him at some point.
That's true.
Um,
Very true.
my final specific question for you, you're more than welcome to
Mhm.
continue speaking though, because I'm having a great time.
Okay.
Do you have a
Me too.
favorite issue or page of Spider-Man that you remember doing?
There was, I don't remember my favorite page. I don't remember what issue though. You know,
Mhm.
it was Spidey. He was coming off a building and there were a million birds, million doves, I think, or pigeons, uh, all over.
Mhm.
I mean, all over the page. That's all I was doing was those damn birds, you know. And the Doc Ock, Spidey with Doc Ock, I
Yeah.
loved. Those books were great. You know, enjoyed those.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to picture the Dove one. Was that with Joe or
I think it was. I think it
okay.
was. Yeah,
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 that sounds
you know,
right.
yeah.
I know I
And
really
420,
oh no, go ahead.
yeah, and 426 with Doc Ock and
Yeah.
427. And they were just great. For me anyway. For
Yeah,
me.
for sure. I always I kind of have I have a history of kind of criticizing the return of Doc Ock because
Mhm.
of how they did it, but I cannot deny that the art in those issues is really great. And I think it was a kind of a really nice way to send Steve off. I'm
Yeah,
glad that he got to work with you on that story because that's so impactful. Because you guys had that crazy stacked issue with 425 because that
oh
was
yeah.
double sized book.
It was.
And
It
so
was. And there was so much of the city, I mean, in the
yes,
background.
yeah,
I mean, city, the buildings and stuff. It was a lot of work,
I
you
can
know?
imagine.
Yeah, you know.
I always
But,
really liked. It's one of those things where that book kind of just goes on forever and ever. But at
mhm,
least when I'm reading it, I'm having a really great time looking at it
yeah.
because
The electro and
I love
stuff.
that suit that you all did, the Electro-proof suit, and I
Yeah.
mean Nate is there, and Electro is
Mhm.
just going absolutely crazy, and he just blows up. So yeah, such a fun read and a fun time to be had. I
Yeah.
always really liked what you and Joe did with Ricochet for those
Oh,
two
yeah.
issues. Um,
Hmm. Thank you.
yeah, and the friend that I mentioned, he actually has one of those pages from that issue. So I'm always
Oh,
just like
cool.
really jealous of him for that. But you guys got to draw Kane, who's a character I really like as a Clone Saga guy in those
Yeah.
issues. So I really liked his costume because it kind of made him they made him all shadow instead of having any color at all, which I thought was always really cool.
Yeah.
So just that identity crisis thing as a whole. I feel like that had to just be a blast for everybody to work on because you're
It
drawing
was,
Spider-Man, but not as Spider-Man.
right. Yeah. And so, what you mentioned it earlier, I think it was issue one where we went back in time.
Hmm.
And that was a really cool issue as well.
Yeah, yeah, the -1 issue.
Yes, yes,
I loved it was so cool because I just the way that that book feels. I liked those flashback issues a lot because they made it feel like a book from the time period. Because obviously the art teams were very modern,
yeah,
just the way that they felt. And your issue specifically had just Peter reading comics. So it
right.
was such that, hey, that's me. I'm reading a comic book about Peter Parker reading a comic book and imagining himself as a hero. So it's such
Yeah,
like an
yeah,
Inception feeling, and the way that the art impacts in that book is just so fun because it's just cool to see Peter's imagination run wild. You guys can just kind of go crazy with it.
yeah. I agree. You
Mm.
know, and it was, it that issue brought the fan out in me.
Yeah,
Doing it based on the old story and stuff. That was a lot of fun. You know, and the Lyle issue was great. Like you said, it wasn't him in costume, but it was a lot of fun to do.
and there were lots of
Who was
you
that
were
was Hyde, I think, right? Hyde was in that.
yeah, yeah, he was
Yeah. Okay.
wanders into
Yeah.
the Bugle. So you were talking about drawing a
Yeah.
bunch of buildings for the Electro issue. You're just drawing a crowd of people for that one.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, what a
Mm.
great times.
And then I don't know how many issues of web spinners I did, but I
Yeah,
did
that's
a
right.
web spinners. And you know, Keith Williams was doing another Spidey book,
Yeah, yeah.
and
He did what, Web of with
yeah,
Alex?
Saviuk, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And he
I was
did
doing backgrounds for him
yeah.
for
Oh,
for
okay.
the whole time. What was that?
Oh no, I was just
Oh,
reminiscing because I was remembering it too.
yeah, I was doing his backgrounds the whole time I was a Raider.
Oh, really?
I mean, yeah, the whole time, the whole year and a half. He was great, Keith.
Yeah, he's a great
Keith is
guy.
really,
I met him earlier this year actually, and I got something from him.
yeah,
So
he's one of my favorite people that I know from the industry.
he was super nice to just talk to,
And,
and he was just really happy about the commission request and everything. So yeah, I'm a
oh,
big fan of his stuff.
yeah, actually, him and just maybe one or two other guys. When, when it was my son's christening and first birthday. Now I live in the Poconos, and he lives in Brooklyn. At the time, he lived
Okay.
in New York. And he's one of two or three guys that I invited, and you know so I was considering him like one of my closest friends.
That's
He was
awesome.
always the greatest. He's a very good guy.
Yeah. And I looked it up just to be sure you did 2 issues of Web Spinners because I couldn't remember.
Oh, thank
It
you,
was
thank you. I didn't remember either how many I did.
the 2 Vulture issues of that book.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's right.
Mm. Well, that's really all the questions I have for you. I don't know if you've got anything else that you'd like to talk about while I have you here. But either way, I really appreciate you coming on.
I do want to ask you. You go to many conventions?
I don't go to a ton, but I
Hmm.
try to go to at least my local ones and maybe 1 or 2 out of state a year if I can.
Okay, then I'll ask you. Um, when I was in the business, Marvel and DC made appearances. They always had representatives at tables, at the conventions. Do they still do that? Do you know?
I think they only do that for the bigger shows, probably
Oh,
like your
mhm.
C2E2 and New York and San Diego and like Emerald City probably.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, it seems a lot of the times now it's just the people with their management when it comes
mm,
to at least artists that are there, and like but I'm sure maybe there's got to be a rep or two at some of the, maybe
Oh,
not like the biggest ones, but like Heroes
mhm.
Con in North Carolina is a pretty big one for the industry. So I would assume there's probably
Yeah,
somebody there.
because I the reason I ask is I used to, when I had the free weekend, I would go and I would do critiques, because they always had the critiques. That's how I ran into John Romita, he was critiquing at the table, I was just wondering if they still do that on the hunt for new artists. I was just curious.
It seems very social media age now,
Yeah.
since a lot of the artists are, I mean, pretty much every artist that I can think of that isn't, still John Romita Jr. and, the older guys from the business working, most of them are overseas. So I guess they have to be
Right.
through email and, all that. So that would be my assumption.
That's true. Yeah, I remember Roger Cruz, he at the time I think he was in Brazil. I
Mhm.
might be wrong as far as which country, but
Right.
he was in South America, and that was like so offbeat, And then I worked with Claudio Castellini, and he was from Italy,
Yeah.
So it was at that time where we were starting to go international with
Was
the art.
was Joe in the States when you were working with him, or was he also?
No, he was overseas too,
Okay, yeah.
you know. Yeah, it was, but before that, it was all American,
Right.
which it's good because it doesn't matter what country you're in as long as you're good.
Yeah.
So, you know, so
Yeah, the work gets done and the work looks damn good, so
yeah,
take it as a
exactly,
win.
exactly.
Mm. Well,
So, but I appreciate you having me on.
yeah.
I'd like to again if you ever meet. You know,
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it. It's such it's such a pleasure to talk to anybody of the time period, but especially people that you admire. It means a lot to just sit down, have a conversation for an hour, and talk and pretty much just gush, I guess, about everything. So, and I mean, I just
I
appreciate you
appreciate that.
reaching
You
back.
made me blush. Thank you.
No problem at all. If
Yeah.
if one thing is consistent on the show, it is definitely me always saying great things about the pairings of artists, and I feel that the 90s in general, but especially like this time period as we're going through every single book, the art teams are just so strong, and I almost can never picture anybody else drawing like Peter Parker the way that you all did back then. So
Thank you. Yeah, it
it's
was a
kind of
lot. It was,
ideal in my mind because as a Clone Saga person, Ben Riley, when I picture Ben Riley, I picture like Tom Lyle is how I picture Ben Riley. But like Peter
right.
Parker, it's always you with Joe and John Romita Jr. with Scott Hanna and Mike Ringo with Rich Case. So it's just all you guys are like my favorites. It's hard to pick
Yeah.
one, but man,
Actually, I have to mention, you've mentioned Scott. Uh, I do have to give a nod, a tip of the hat to Scott. When it was right before I hit John Romita. I was at maybe, I don't know, it was like maybe 6 months before that. I was at a different convention and I was walking around with my portfolio and Scott was at a table. He called me over, I was just a kid to him, and he said, "That's your portfolio?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Let me take a look." He's looking at it and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Flatbush, Brooklyn." He said, "I'm in Park Slope." He said, and he gives me his address. And he started having me come over like once or twice a week, and I thought it was the greatest thing. I thought he was the coolest guy,
that's
because,
awesome.
I'd be waiting at his brownstone and he was right off of Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and he would be coming down the street with his frisbee, like just playing in the park with his friends, and then he'd bring me up to his studio, and he was telling, like, he'd give me pencil pages to do, as samples, just to practice on pages,
Yeah.
and it was great. He taught me a lot, and he was really, really kind, and he went the extra mile for me, so And I learned to do that, to pay it forward, So whenever I had the opportunity to help somebody break in or, help somebody with their art, I always did because he led by example.
That's really great.
Yeah, he's another great artist.
Yeah, super kind dude. He worked. I mean, Scott was Tom's first big collaborator,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I have a great affinity for him because of that as well.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And it's great to see him and Keith at these. Like I said, I just started doing conventions again, so and they're always at those conventions. So it's great to see them again. We're a little older, but
still get it
just
done,
a
right?
little. you know. So
Well, you said you had a convention in January. Where are you going to be?
yeah, Garden State Comic Fest in Jersey. And
Awesome.
it's the weekend of the 25th.
Okay, great. So
Yeah,
hopefully the people in the area will come see you if they
yeah,
hear this.
yeah,
So
definitely.
I wish I could
Definitely.
be
I'll
there
throw.
myself.
Great. I'd love to see you, maybe one day.
Yeah,
Whereabouts are you? On the East Coast, West Coast?
I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Virginia.
Oh, oh, Virginia, okay. Maybe I'll try to get down that way to do a convention at one point.
That'd be
You
great.
know,
I'd be happy to see you. Get some work
yeah,
from you.
yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. So, you know, let's
Well,
see.
yeah,
Oh yeah, Garden State Comic Fest. Weekend of the 25th in January. Plugging.
cool. Sweet. Yeah. Feel free to plug anything else if you want. I know you're on Instagram. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
super active in advertising on there, but you're more than welcome to.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, he's Instagram and see him at that Garden State.
Yes.
So
You can meet the jerky guy in person.
no. You can get some recipes though, apparently, right?
Oh yeah, I'll teach everyone how to cook Italian, authentic Italian. Make your own pasta.
Fantastic. My favorite meal is pasta, so there you go.
There you go. Hey, hit me up for a recipe. You'll be slinging pasta. You'll
Instead
be
of
slinging your own dough.
instead of webs, I'll be slinging pasta.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This, like I mentioned, is my first formal interview for something like this, and especially for the show. So I think I'm starting off with a bang, and hopefully some more will come my way. So I really appreciate you getting back to me and the communication and everything.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad to have done it, and I feel privileged to have done it with you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to end the recording now for the people. I'm not going to hang
Okay.
up on you. But yeah, for everybody that's listening, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to be
Yeah.
titling this episode A Chat with My Bud. And in parentheses, I'm going to put
Cool.
LaRosa. Um, so for the title. But thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. Check out
Thank you,
Bud's
everybody.
work and just keep on loving comics.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.